what exactly are the differences between somebody who is a junior designer and somebody who is a senior designer? Now, I think intuitively we do understand that somebody who is more senior earns a lot more money. They're able to apply for roles that would have been unimaginable maybe when they were just starting out. They also are able to get really good opportunities at really fast growth companies, work with the best people, but they also have an increased sense of responsibility. So if you're somebody who's maybe in the middle of their career or they're starting out, how do you actually plan your roadmap towards becoming much better? What are the specific skills and qualities that you can work on, and what exactly does that look like? In this video, we're going to go through that in immense detail, very deep detail. My name is Abhinav. I'm the founder of 10K Designers. With our cohort-based course, we've helped hundreds of designers navigate exactly this complicated roadmap. Besides that, previously I was the head of design at Unacademy, joined there super early, built the design team, redesigned the learner platform, education platform. Today, Unacademy is a unicorn worth a couple of $1 billion, one of the biggest online live learning platforms in India and possibly the world. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. So first up, I want to share a very important resource with you. This is an article written by Aaron James, which, huge article, 29-minute read, but I'm going to give you a quick summary of how you can really think about this. One of the things that Aaron has also shared is this rubric that breaks down by specific areas and helps you understand what's the progression as you move from the left side of this column, from the junior levels to the mid-level, upwards towards senior, lead, and principal. So let's get started. Overall, the areas that you see here, right? The top 6 areas that have been mentioned here. Number 1, product thinking. Number 2, interaction. Number 3, visual design. 4 is your intentionality. 5 is drive, and 6 is self-awareness. Now, these are very useful top-level views, but what exactly does this mean, right? How can you be more intentional or, have more drive? What exactly does that mean in the context of somebody who is working in a team? So let's dive into each and every one of these. Now, before we get into this, one expectation that I want to just make very clear is this article talks about what you want to do if you want to go up the design career ladder. Now, just because we are able to talk about this career ladder and it does apply to companies, right? Bigger companies where this career ladder exists, I want to just make very clear that climbing the design ladder inside a company is not the end of this. And neither is it the only step you should follow. Over the last couple of videos, we have shared other design paths. In our roadmap video, we talked about the idea that you could explore these multiple paths, those of being a freelancer, launching your own agency, starting your own products, using your design skill in unique, interesting ways in this AI world that we live in today. But this, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the kind of skills that are expected, especially when you're working in a team. So even if you are somebody who is working in an agency, it might make a lot of sense for you to use this as a quick reference to figure out what your gaps are and whether you can hire for these gaps. In some cases, hire people in your team who can really bring up the overall strength of your team. But if you're an individual and you're trying to figure out how do I make my way through certain companies, upskill in the company I'm currently at, or apply to opportunities that pay me more at bigger companies, at better teams, this is going to be really useful for you. So category number 1 is user understanding. Now, there is a certain level of understanding and intuition that happens when you're a more senior designer, right? What this user understanding looks like at the extreme is that you are able to identify organization level knowledge gaps. Now, keep in mind that these levels typically exist in a very codified way when it comes to bigger companies. So if you're at a company like Microsoft, yes, each of these levels probably have 3 to 6 levels within it, right? Associate, senior, and terminology may vary by company. But if you're in a startup, this is definitely a smooth spectrum and you can lie somewhere on the spectrum. And what it starts with is you understanding your user, developing that a little better, to the point where you can say that, hey, our organization, this is our business model, these are the products that we do, and based on this is what we should be doing. Now, not to say that only somebody who's a principal can do that. Somebody who's in the starting levels of their career but has a very realistic, pragmatic way of looking at the world, intuition, and immerses themselves in the problem space and solution space might be able to get this very early on. However, understand that these levels, they are tied to responsibility. So you being at a senior level for company A does not guarantee that you will be a senior level at company B. Or just a quick example would be a company that is, let's say, in an early stage with 20 employees and 1 million users. Now, the expectations there are definitely that you help the company scale, that you are able to bring that design thinking to help execute on features, to help other organization level goals, right, at a very broad level. But of course, if you're at a huge company where there are thousands of employees, the difficulty of being at somebody who's at a principal level is very, very hard. So just to give you an example, I do know some designers who are at this principal level at companies like Microsoft who have been at the organization for maybe 10, 20 years in some cases, right? So hopefully that helps you understand this a little better. Going deeper, the other two things here, right? Business understanding as well as an understanding of product strategy. This is really important. Now, as a junior designer, you might not have a very clear idea of this. And the main reason is, of course, if you're enrolled in something like the 10K designers cohort, we help you with case studies that specifically help develop a basic understanding of this. But this is one of the most challenging areas for folks who are, let's just say, more tool users. Somebody who's a Figma person who can do whatever you say in Figma. But the minute you go outside of Figma, the minute you have to think about something at a broader level, that person gets stuck. Right? They find it really hard to understand the bigger context in which their design operates. And even if they are able to understand, right, this can be a very steep curve. Right? It might take you a long time to get towards this level, but just so you understand, this is not easy. However, this is one of the things that adds tremendous value to you as a designer, because the closer you are able to get to the business model of where the value lies for the company, the more clarity you will have, number one, in thinking about your users, the more clarity you will have on what success looks like. You will clearly be able to look at your design and say, I can guess that based on what our product's goals and our features goals and, competitors and all of this, I can guess that this is a pretty goddamn good 7 out of 10 solution. But here is where the gaps are, right? And how well you are able to fill those gaps. What that product intuition is, what a lot of people call this, comes down to is this, right? And just to note, these, they all pretty much say the same thing, just higher and higher levels. But I hope you're able to imagine this. As you join bigger companies that have multiple product lines, right? So a company like a food delivery app might have a supply side, and then they might have a consumer side. So riders and drivers. Now within that, they might have multiple lines. So you have a grocery delivery versus you have a restaurant delivery. On the restaurant side, you might have, or let's just say on the supply side, you might have the driver's app, and then you also have the restaurant's app, right? That is a portfolio of products, and they all link to each other. There are multiple customer journeys involved, and they do intersect. Right? So you do over time have to build up that top level view where you are able to zoom out as needed. But as designers, you have to also be able to zoom in to the deepest details. And that's when we will come to the next thing, your interaction design. But overall, I hope you understand what this means. Now, this has nothing to do with your Figma. It has nothing to do with your tools, but it has everything to do with the outcome that you are able to create, the success that you're able to create. At a junior level, most people cannot zoom out at that organization level because they do not have the resolution to see what is this. Like, I don't have, number one, the patterns to match this and say, this is what it is. I understand what's going on. Neither have you maybe spent enough time at the company to confidently be able to say, yes, that is how it is. Or confidently be able to say, yes, that is how this product currently works. And so without that confidence, sometimes it gets difficult to justify your design decisions. I'm sure that's something you have faced before, where you feel like everything I do is always getting questioned, and I'm never able to confidently say, hey, this is what it is. And the reason for that is usually this context. Now, the context can be a user context here, which is this one here. It can be a business context of how the company makes money, how is it growing, and how do multiple product lines connect there. It could also be product strategy, which is what exactly are our strategies for growth, right? Once you understand these multiple product lines, you might also develop a good understanding of what are the levers, right? The term typically used by folks at this level are what are the levers that we can pull, right? So for example, if there is a long-term product strategy related to some product, you might have a good understanding that the users here, this is exactly what they're looking for. And if you're able to give them specifically this and measure this metric, we can backtrack and say, this is our impact, right? Now, of course, I'm just giving you these random examples. Some of these, especially if you're in the junior, it might take some time to land. Which is, if you've not been in this position, a lot of these are question marks. But what I do hope is now you know this exists. So even if you are at this level, you are able to question, what are the gaps for me to go to the next level and next level, right? Let's keep going. Number 2, now we're getting into a little bit more of the craft. This is your actual design work. A lot of this is design patterns, systems, and prototyping. A lot of this is visual design. Now, let me take these two categories together, right? The first thing here is design patterns. Now, a simple example of this at the junior level, if I had to talk about this at a very junior level, if you are designing a very simple product page, right? It's an e-commerce app that you're working on. There is a certain pattern associated with how you will see the big image. There might be a carousel of images. What kind of buttons do you have? Add to cart, buy now. How do you show reviews? The star notation, right? These are common patterns that you see across all e-commerce sites. So as a junior designer, you need to understand what these design patterns are. Once you know how to use them, or once you know what they are, you realize what are the pros and cons. Like, you might try very hard to find the exact pattern that does this, but you're like, no, there's something wrong here. Like, there's definitely some gap here that is not being met, right? And you also then understand, why is this a pattern? Like, why do all apps have very specific things, like design elements that you will find in every single app? Now, is it really the best solution, or is there some deeper understanding here, right? You're developing that understanding of that pattern. Once you have a strong understanding of it, you are also able to tweak, right? I think that comes later here, design pattern pioneer. But to give you an example, right, since we're talking about design patterns, let's talk about the pattern of pull to refresh. Now, any app that has a feed does have to at some point think about, how do we refresh items in this feed? Should we do it automatically, or should there be a user action that initiates a refresh? Now, you could just very simply add a refresh button, right? But the standard pattern for algorithmic feeds to refresh it is pull to refresh. So pull to refresh, that's your design pattern. But a principal designer, now going to the opposite end of the spectrum, is somebody who's able to literally create this pull to refresh, right? Somebody who's able to create a new pattern that fits some new paradigm, right? And becomes so widely adopted that multiple people in the industry use this. Somebody who sets a certain trend for the first time that carries forward. Now, definitely, the examples I've given you are on the easier side, right? There's a lot of principal designers out there, and this does not really tie to popularity, right? When I'm telling you about these patterns, it's not like you need to know who's the inventor of swipe to refresh, right? Pull to refresh. It's more that a lot of times somebody who's deep in an organization might come up with these new patterns, and they might not always be popularized for it or become famous for it or something like that, right? But patterns, spotting them, identifying them, tweaking them, understanding the considerations that go behind them, these are all very important things that you learn over time as a designer. Beyond this, design systems. Now, I'm pretty sure you guys have a rough idea of what design systems are. If you are starting out now, you might not have too much experience with a design system, especially given that at this start out level, you are likely to have worked with smaller companies that can make do without one, right? But as it scales up, so to give you an example, Janil, his company has 200 designers, right? He works for Rocket Mortgage in the US. Now, Rocket Mortgage as an organization has thousands of employees, right? That's my guess at least. But designers, I know they have 200 designers. So at that level, to consistently ship quality work, you need to have design systems, and you will have people who are dedicated to it, right? So that is what this talks about, right? Now, I'm not really saying that you need to be able to design a design system from scratch. I'm not saying everybody needs to be able to do that. Sometimes you're in a company, and unless your title is design systems manager or lead design systems or something like that, you will not be the one who's responsible for creating and maintaining, but you're the one who is responsible for integrating, just taking it and actually using it in the way it was meant to be used, or making suggestions for what is an improvement and working with that design systems team to, figure it out. That overall is what this is. Going further, prototypes. Now, at a basic level, when you're starting out, you are linking your screens to create prototypes such that you are able to take a phone and show it to someone and say, hey, can you try out this app that I made? Can you try out this flow? Whether that's a colleague, whether that's a user, whether that's just somebody sitting next to you at Starbucks and you want to try something out. But it goes to extremes, because even with prototypes, there is levels of fidelity. You can have very extremely realistic prototypes, right? So there are macro and micro interactions. A micro interaction would be on a certain screen how something happens. A macro here, my guess what they're referring to here when they say this is longer flows. So something like a checkout flow, which is multi-step, and not every option will be used. How do you create a prototype that actually covers these cases and lets you test all the stuff that you want, right? So overall, that is this increasing levels of prototyping here. Finally, the last one on this is you are primarily in code to test design hypothesis, consider you're a technologist. Now keep in mind that these principal levels, somebody who's a principal designer is not necessarily 10 out of 10 in each and every one of these categories, right? If you are somebody who's a design technologist, like if you are 10 out of 10, like 11 out of 10, goddamn, in prototyping at a principal level, like that is possible. You could be the person in your company who's responsible for prototypes, right? You could be the person who, and it might be hard for you to visualize how deep does this really go? Like, why is prototyping such a big deal? To give you an example, let's say you were designing Instagram stories and you want to quickly figure out what's the interaction where as I type longer sentences, at what point does the text size become smaller? Are you able to visualize what I'm saying? Inside Instagram stories, when I hit text, when I start typing, after a certain point, it becomes smaller, the text. Now, to create a prototype to test whether it feels good, whether it should happen earlier, or even to have the fidelity where somebody can actually use this and you can observe them and you're able to get insights out of this, right? You're able to think about what the hypothesis is, what exactly is this prototype trying to prove. You are making a very, very high fidelity to the point where you're maybe directly making code prototypes. You realize, hey, you know what? I'm just going to make this prototype in Swift, or I'm going to use origami, which is also a high fidelity prototyping tool. That's what this level looks like. I'm just now midway into the video realizing this is going to be really long, but I think let's just keep going. Now, visual design, my guess is this is the most intuitive one here. Like this would be the easiest to understand, which is the principles, the core principles of color, typography, icons, layout, things like hierarchy, white space. How do I consider layout options? How do I use existing design system stuff here? How do I create improvements? How do I know when to use certain things and when to use something else, right? The decisions that come around these design principles, that is overall what this is talking about, right? At the very basic level, you're leveraging these existing design system choices, right? You do have some rationale why you're doing it. That's very important. But over time, you level up here, right? You level up, which is at the extreme spectrum, you are creating stuff that is pushing the design industry forward. Your craftsmanship is unparalleled, right? You are making the kind of stuff that, things like Linear. When I go to Linear's website and I see the micro interactions, people are going to be talking about that design for weeks, right? Copycats are going to copy that particular thing because it was so good and it was clear that it was good. It was appreciated by everybody, right? That's what a trendsetter is, right? That's what this extreme looks like. Now, a similar thing applies to motion. Motion, a quick note, is very closely tied to prototyping. One way of thinking about motion is animations, right? Of course, we all think about things like loading animations. You might have certain micro interactions that happen, but the core difference between animation and prototyping motion would be an animation doesn't necessarily have a trigger, right? Like I can't keep tapping on something versus in Twitter, for example, when I hit the like button, the little splash that happens, right? I don't know if you've ever noticed. You probably have because you're a designer, you're this many minutes into this video. That is an interaction, right? So that you might consider that prototyping, but it's very closely associated with motion because when you are creating these prototypes, you are also kind of choreographing what the elements are going to do. What is the entry? So for example, what do transitions between screen A and screen B look like? Even at 30 FPS or 60 FPS, there are multiple frames in between. What motion happens and how does that logically make sense, right? That is what the extreme starts looking like, right? You are able to understand that this is not just animation. You're able to understand that, hey, this drives real business value. It might be very hard for you to visualize how can something like animation drive business value. But just a quick example here would be when you make a payment with something like Paytm, you're paying via UPI. You notice there's a little micro interaction in the end. The green arrow keeps moving, right? And now there is a very clear business value there, and you could maybe it's user value a little bit more. The reason for that is when I show the screen to the shopkeeper or whatever, and say the payment is done, rather than showing a static screen, which could be a screenshot, it shows some visual, and that your eye goes directly to the thing that's moving on the screen, and that's the big check mark that's saying done, 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 done. It's continuously looping. Even if I showed you 10 seconds later, it's still looping. Right now, that is having deep level of intentionality about this. So guys, that is motion in visual design. Beyond this, I'm going to talk about these things. Developing a design process, developing communication, developing collaboration. I think this is pretty straightforward what it is. I might just skip over this, but the point I really want to make, right, as we're coming towards the end of this rubric: leadership, ownership of your workload, your community, your self-awareness. Now, the thing I want to make very clear here is, at a junior level, if you are somebody who wants to get a starting role, you want to get a role as a junior, or let's just say entry level product designer or UI UX designer, you need to have all of these. You need to have a good understanding of users, a good understanding of the product strategy, how patterns work, roughly what design systems are, at least to the level of auto layout and maybe the technical aspects. You need to understand how do I use prototypes and when to use prototypes. Of course, you need to understand visuals. You need to understand, to some extent, motion, right? This one I would say is probably the lighter one here. Right? You can be very basic at this and work on this later. Intentionality, you definitely need to have a design process, right? Without a design process, it can be very hard to keep track of your project, right? Especially at the junior level, the problems around design process are very closely related to problems of motivation, because sometimes without an intentional design process, what can end up happening is you lose steam, you lose momentum, and life gets in the way, and then exams suddenly, and now you've lost 2 or 3 months where you could have made some progress, right? Now, that's not exactly a design process, but having design process and being intentional about the work that you are doing can really help you with that, right? These phases here, these phases, by the way, are from the double diamond process. Now, you don't necessarily need to know double diamond. You just need to know the concept, how it works, because over time, intuitively, you are going to be doing discovery, defining, developing, delivering, right? Even if you don't really know the words here. Just to drop a little bit, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'll be very honest with you. I didn't know what this was, at least for the first 5 years as a designer, but that didn't stop me. I made a good amount of money. I worked at amazing companies, and I never once said the word double diamond or can we do the discovery phase, developing phase? Like, I did not think about it this way, right? The way I would think about it is actually the thing that's missing here would be understanding of the product life cycle. Design process is a part of the product life cycle. The work does not end when your design is over. The work ends when the work ends when the user uses it. But even then, that's not over. You get feedback and you refine, right? The work never ends. The work gets good enough till you move on to something else. But design is a continuous process, and even you alone as a designer still need to work with product managers, you still need to work with developers, you still need to work with other teams in the company to make sure what you've designed gets out there in the best way possible, right? Your vision can be compromised. Your developers might not do it the way you intended it to be because of certain constraints, right? Or if timeline squeezes happen, some things might get chopped off, and the things that you wanted to keep might get chopped off. How do you influence somebody to do that, right? That becomes communication and collaboration. You are able to communicate your reasoning, you're able to influence others, and you're not just doing this by information dumping on them, right? Trying to confuse them or force them to listen to you, right? Just being here at a senior level, it's not about bullying people to be like, oh, do what I say. No, you are doing it in the kindest way possible. You're doing it in a way where people are genuinely appreciative of, wow, the conciseness with which you said it and all the completeness, right? All the points you mentioned. The accuracy where you said what I was thinking has really helped me today. This was a learning process, right? Today I learned something new. That's what a strong communicator looks like, right? And it's very easy to spot. And that is the level of collaboration that's needed. A point here is that you have an open mind to others' perspectives. Now, a lot of people might see the senior here and might, have some preconceived notions of what a senior in a company is supposed to be, right? Maybe it's from bad experiences, maybe it's from movies or something, and you're imagining some asshole boss who is shutting you down, who's like, playing some kind of mind games or something. But the point is, at this senior level, you have actually a lot more to prove, right? Just because you're in a senior level, people don't listen to you, right? You're at the senior level, which means everybody can tell you you're doing it wrong. you are accountable, right? The accountability, the responsibility on you increases as you go up the spectrum. So having this ability to collaborate and communicate, where you are not just saying, listen to me because I have the power, I have the senior in my title. You're saying, no, listen to me because I make sense. Listen to me because, yes, I have considered all these things you're thinking about. Listen to me because I am giving you an accurate picture of what it is. Listen to me because I am listening to you. I am listening to you. I have an open mind. When you tell me something, I'm not going to get defensive, and I'm not going to hold a prejudice, a grudge against you. How the fuck, kaise bol diya isne mujhe? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to put in the time. I'm not going to sit in my, 11th floor office and be like, do the work. I'm actually attending your meetings. I'm attending your workshops. I'm in the arena with you because I need to build trust. And without trust, you will do the work, but you'll do it begrudgingly and you will not do your best. And me, as a head of design, will not be able to get you to perform the best. I will not be able to motivate you. I will not be able to help you create the best work of your life if I'm not good at communicating, if I'm not good at collaborating, if I don't have a good understanding of the product life cycle. Intentionality, if I'm not intentional with every word that I say, with every action that I do, and with every little item on my list. These two points here around leadership and community, these tie in very deeply as well. When you start out, you are somebody who is coachable. Now you might think here, like, this is the default, right? Mentee, it's pretty much the default. Like, why do I need to learn something for this? Boss, the reason you need to learn something is not everybody is coachable. You realize most people, when told they're doing something wrong, freeze up, get defensive. They start thinking about, what am I going to say next? Instead of focusing on listening, they focus on, how do I counter what was said? How do I protect my status? How do I protect my, they're constantly doing this. That's not what a successful mentee is. That's not somebody who is learning. That's somebody who's playing defensive. Now, there could be deep psychological reasons why you're doing that, but I really think you owe it to yourself, especially if you want to grow in some kind of career, you want to do your own business, you want to be in a field that is competitive. You need to be coachable, right? From the right people. You need to be able to implement advice. You need to be able to listen to people. You need to know who to ask for advice. You ideally also have a network, right? As you go deeper here, you have a network of designers that you are able to talk to. If you are here in this very senior lead position or maybe a head of design, you can use this network to recruit people, to hire the best people for the team. At these senior levels, people don't just join for the company, they join for the people. They join because they want to work with you, right? So as you go senior here, you have more people in your network that would quit their job just to work with you, right? That is literally your influence in the industry. Outside of this, leadership, right? If I had to put in a very simple one sentence of what's the difference between a junior designer and a senior designer, is that a junior designer needs to be told what to do. A senior designer knows what needs to be done and knows how to ask people to do the work. And the only way they're able to do that is because they've intentionally developed these skills of articulation, of being able to talk through their diverse experiences. They've seen failure, right? A lot of these things are not about doing the right thing. It's about avoiding the wrong thing. And how do you know to avoid it? It's because you did the wrong thing once. Your mistakes over time become valuable as you get into a senior position, because now you are able to, through the diverse experiences you had, say that this is a wrong thing. This is pattern matching. This is not good, not bad. Now, of course, there's a negative side to this, which is as technology changes, you might get stuck in a certain way of thinking. And it could happen at any of these levels. You could get stuck. But overall, I hope this gives you a good understanding. How do you avoid getting stuck? How do you keep moving forward? How do you know what to work on? It comes down to self-awareness. Do you have a good understanding of your strengths? Do you? Because most people, I can tell you this, most people do not want to talk about their strengths because they think it's bragging. They think it's showing off. And they spend a disproportionate amount of their effort, their attention, their energy thinking about the negatives. Like, oh, I'm so bad at this. I'm so bad at this. I can't do it. Guys, that's okay. We are all bad at something. But you need to not shy away from your strength. You need to understand that. You need to be able to communicate your strength. And you need to be able to know how to do this in an intentional way. Coming back to this, right? Don't shy away from your strengths. Develop your strengths. And a related note I'll just add here is a lot of people, especially when you're at this early stage, I can empathize that you are a bit underconfident in your work, right? You're lacking a little bit of conviction. You're not able to say that with the full confidence because you're like, there's a good chance I'm wrong. But that doesn't mean you don't try. It just means when you are wrong, you know to correct yourself and not let it bother you. You know to take the learning from it, not take it too personally, and just roll with it, right? Overall, as you do this at a higher and higher level, some of your responsibility also then becomes being able to do this for other people, right? What I'm doing for you right now, demystifying these things, talking about my personal experience, giving you examples, and helping you think through these things such that you have a tangible benefit in your life, in your career, in your skills, right? I am doing this for you here right now. And so in a company, as you go higher into these levels, you are expected to do this for other design interns that are joining, people who are new on the team. And not just that, you're expected to do this even for people who are really experienced. You are expected to help manage expectations in a lot of cases, right? And that comes down to having clear, concise communication. But overall, it also means knowing what the fuck you're doing. And knowing what the fuck you're doing, you can think about it along these different axes. So overall, I hope this was useful to you. Definitely recommend checking this out. I will leave a link. There is a self-assessment here that helps you just quickly, rate yourself for this. Now, personally, I would say, use this. But it might also be useful for you to literally write these down in your primary notebook, whatever that might be, and think about, is there something I can do to move to the next level? Have visibility over this. And one thing I will definitely suggest is if you're in these earlier stages, knowing this can help you have conversations with your team. So to your manager, you can say, hey, I am really trying to figure out how can I develop my sense of product strategy. Now, you can't just say that in a vague way. Like develop my sense. You can't also say this to a stranger, right? You can't just ask me, for example, in my DMs, how do I do product strategy? It's a very subjective question. It depends on where you are. It depends how much responsibility is given to you, but it also depends on who are the other people. It depends on what is the product. It depends on what is the business goal. It depends on what domain that business is, right? Strategy to do what, right? So it's a question you can only ask somebody who really deeply knows you and is in the same context as you, right? So overall, I hope this gave you a really good example. A quick plug here. We have a cohort. This is our 7th cohort now. We internally have also developed a similar rubric to assess. Some of you have seen this in our videos. We have a 12-point graph where we think about understanding. However, this is something we deeply help people with. Right? One of the most common testimonials and feedbacks we've received from people is it's not just design. Like, you taught me so much more than design. And a lot of times what they're talking about are things like this. How do you influence people? How do you say things clearly? How do you not get overwhelmed? How do I understand what's happening? How do I understand who are the players in this game? How do I develop a network, right? What we help you do is if you are at this level of junior, let's say you're not even on this map, you're at pre-junior, right? You've just gotten started. We help you tick off all these boxes, literally all of these boxes, and not just at the junior level. We help you tick off till this level. So you can be guaranteed that if you're enrolling in one of these cohorts, your results will definitely vary. The things you will focus on will definitely be different. But this is not a one-time effort, right? This is, if you are serious about design, something that you have to really think about, something that over time you will develop. And with this video, I hope I was able to share that with you and teach you something new today. So thanks a lot for watching. My name is Abhinav. On this channel, we publish design content every single week to help you become a better designer and to help you find a network, to help you make more money and build a satisfying career as a designer. Thanks. See you.